So we're going to take a look at Daf Yud Zayin, and this is about a sugya that began earlier in the chapter, which is called Nidui. And when you put a person into Nidui, then people have to stay far away from him, not come within 4 amos of him. They don't do business with him. He's sort of like excommunicated, and usually it's because he was pogeh and covered at Torah. So the Gemara says, Talmud shenida likvodo. If let's say you have a Talmud and somebody was contemptuous, somebody insulted him, the Talmud himself has the ability to put that person into nidui, niduyo nidui. And the Gemara is going to try to prove this later on, that his nidui, even though he's a Talmud, he's not the Rebbe, is still valid and binding. Tanya, we learned in the following brisa: Menuda l'Rav, menuda l'Talmud. Somebody was excommunicated because of his disrespect to a Torah teacher, then all the students are included in that prohibition about getting close to or coming within proximity of the person who was put into nidui. But the brisa says it's only a one-way street. It goes from top down to the bottom. But menuda l'Talmud, if a Talmud puts someone into nidui because that person had insulted the Talmud, eno menuda l'Rav. The Rav is not bound by that nidui. He's not prohibited as a result of the nidui of the Talmud. Everybody else, as we're going to soon see, is prohibited. And that's the Gemara's diuk in order to support the statement of Talmud shenida l'chodo. Now, who made that statement on the top of Omen Aleph? So if you take a look at the last 2 lines on Daf Tezayin base, you'll see a whole who's list here. It's Rabbi Tanchum, the son of Rabbi Chia, in the name of Rabbi Yaakov Baracha, in the name of Rabbi Simlai, in the name of Rabbi Tanchum Rav Huna. Anyway, it's a whole long list of who's who. Now the Gemara is medayik from the brisa to support that who's list. L'Rav hu di'ena menuda. If the Talmud puts a whammy on somebody, he's not excommunicated as far as the Rebbe is concerned. The Rav doesn't have to be noeg nidu vis-a-vis that person who was excommunicated. But the implication is l'kuli alma, as far as the balance of the world is concerned, menuda, the nidui is valid. So that although the teacher is not chayev in being noeg nidui towards the person, everybody else is. Lamai. Now, what kind of a sin was the person who was excommunicated by the Talmud guilty of? Ibamili dishmaya, if it was something that had an element of chil Hashem involved, that person was machal shem shamayim, then in that case, the Gemara is going to prove from a pasuk in Mishlei that even the Rav is committed or is enjoined by the nidui. The nidui is valid and binding even towards the Rav. What does the pasuk say in Mishlei? Ein chachma vein tuna vein eitel neged Hashem. When it's against Hashem, wisdom, no matter how brilliant you are, is irrelevant. And therefore, if there's a chil Hashem involved, if, let's say, for example, someone insulted one of the great leaders of the generation, and therefore he was put into nidui, in this case by a Talmud, that nidui generates a status of nidui and all the chiyuvim thereof for everybody, even for his Rebbe. Elalav, if it's not the case of mili deshmaya, then it must be lichvod atzmo, that this person who was excommunicated by the Talmud had insulted the honor of the Talmud. And yet again, when the Talmud puts him into nidui, that nidui is binding for everybody except for the Rebbe. And therefore, we prove that statement that Talmud shenida lichvodo is Niduyo Nida. Rav Yosef, if let's say somebody owes money and refuses to pay up his debt to a Talmud, then the Talmud is allowed to take the law into its own hands. That's called Ovin Inish Dini L'Nafshe, but only b'milsa de psikale, only if it's absolutely clear to the Talmud. It's not like he remembers that somebody borrowed money from him maybe a year ago or 2 years ago and he didn't pay it back. Maybe he did pay me back. It's crystal clear. The man took money from me a month ago and absolutely did not repay his debt. In such a case, Ovid Inish Dina L'Nafshi. What does that mean? In the Gemara's language elsewhere, but Metzia, it's called Tfisa. Tfisa means to grab onto his possessions. And the Talmud is allowed to literally grab onto the possessions of the debtor, and he's not going to return those possessions until such time as the debtor pays him up and ransoms and redeems that which he took. So even though normally, if you have a claim against someone, you have to take that claim to court, you can't take the law into your own hands. But the exception, says Rav Yosef, is the case of a Talmud, and only if it's milsa de psikale. Ahu tzur mimir rabbanan. There was once a Talmud Chacham, Navi Sanu Shma'e. When I looked at this Gemara, I was thinking of current events. I mean, in the last, whatever it is, 3 weeks or.
Right.
His reputation was hateful. And here the Mefarshim have two approaches. According to one approach, it was just simply rumors were floating around him. Maybe he was he violated yichud, he was alone with married women. And that's as far as the bad reputation went. According to others, and Rashi seems to imply this elsewhere in Masechet Megillah, he had a reputation of being an adulterer. Not just that he was alone with married women, which is bad enough, but the word about him was that he was guilty of adultery. I'm thinking to myself, maybe he victimized married women. Maybe he threatened them. Maybe he controlled their mind. Who knows what? And this is the reputation about this Talmud Chacham. You can imagine what a Chil Hashem it is. And yet, Amar Rav Yehuda vacillates. Heichi Levin, what should we do? L'shamtei, if we put him into Shamtui, then Tzricha Le Rabbana, this man is educating our students. He is the chief educator of the entire yeshiva. All those who are studying for smicha are studying under his tutelage. We can't do without him. Now, this touches on another sugya that came earlier in the Masechta about whether you're allowed to study Torah from someone who's in nidui. And the Gemara seems to assume here that you're not allowed to study Torah from him. If we put him in nidui, the whole curriculum, the whole program in the yeshiva is going to fall apart because he's the head honcho and he's teaching everyone. Lola Champe. So what's the other option? We don't excommunicate him? Come mitchal shmei shamaya. There'll be a chil of shem shamayim. Because the word is out that this person is a sinner and yet he's teaching Torah? Horrible. Amalei l'Rabba bar bar Chana. So now Rabbi Yehuda turns to his Talmud Rabbah and he says to Midnik Shmielach, go out and see if you heard something about this. Amalei hachi amar Rabbi Yochanan. This is what I heard from Rabbi Yochanan. My dichsiv. What does the Torah mean at the end of Tanakh? In Malachi it says, Kisif Seikon Yishmu Das, the Torah Yivakshu Mipir. That Sifsei Kohen are the teachers of Torah. And then at the end of the pasuk it says, Ki Malach Hashem Tvakosu, because the teacher of Torah, in this case the Kohen, is like an angel. And what's the equation between teaching Torah and the angel? What is the pasuk teaching me? Says Rabbi Yochanan Doma, Harav l'malach Hashem yivakshu Torah mipiu. V'im lav al yivakshu Torah mipiu. We only seek to learn Torah from someone who is absolutely nucky. He's clean. And his reputation is clean. He's like a Malach Hashem, which means he overcomes any kind of taiva, any kind of lust or desire that he has. Now, once Rabbi Bar Chana quoted this statement of Rabbi Yochanan, the message was clear to Rabbi Yehuda that the answer to his question was, no matter what, we have to put this person into nidui. Why? Because you're telling me, well, don't put him into nidui. You know why? Because we won't be able to learn Torah from him. You can't learn Torah from him in any event, even if you don't put him into nidui. So don't tell me that by putting him into nidui, you're disrupting or interrupting the transmission of Torah. The damage has already been done. He's not Doma L'Malach Elokim Tzvakos. And forget it, we can't learn Torah from him. He's a sinner. He cannot control his desires. And therefore, since if we don't put him into Cherem, into Nidui, there will be a Chil Hashem, for sure we have to put him into Nidui. And this is the story of the famous Talmud Chacham that was put into Nidui by Rabbi Yehuda. The story goes on. Shamte Rabbi Yehuda, Eblasov Ichlich Rabbi Yehuda. So apparently, after a 3-year period of time, we'll see in the Gemara later on, Rabbi Yehuda became very ill. He was on his deathbed. Also, Rabbanan came to visit him, ask how he's doing. Asa iu nami padehu. And this guy who had been put into nidui by Rabbi Yehuda came along with escorted the other Chachamim when they came to say goodbye to Rabbi Yehuda. Now, the Mukhi Yosef points out that they must have stood at a distance of at least 4 amos from him because he was in Nidui. And you get the impression that maybe this student, this Talmud Chacham who had been put into Nidui, maybe he was doing tshuva. And he was looking for an opportunity to appeal to Rabbi Yehuda's compassion. Maybe Rabbi Yehuda would release him of the nidui, and only Rabbi Yehuda could release him from the nidui. Chadchazia Rabbi Yehuda sees this fellow, recognizes him. He was the guy that he put in the nidui, and chayach, and he starts laughing at him. He's like mocking him. Amalei. So this Talmud Chacham says to Rabbi Yehuda, Lo mistayach, it's not enough that Shampe, you put me into Cherem Ahu Gavri, speaks about himself in third person. El achuchi nami chayach, you make fun of me? I mean, this is very humiliating. It's bad enough that you put me into Shamta, but now you're laughing at me? I'm not laughing at you at all. I'm laughing and I'm happy because I'm about to enter the pearly gates. When I leave this world and go into that world, I'm going to be in a good mood. Why? Even a person of your stature who's been teaching Torah to the head of the academy. Lo chanifile. There was no chanifa. I didn't play up to you. I put you into cherem because you deserve cherem. So the very fact that I see you, that puts me in a good mood because I realize it sinks in, it sinks home that I have a good place up there in the world to come because I didn't come for you. Noch nafshi de Rabbi Yehuda. Now Rabbi Yehuda dies. Also the baby Joshua. So this person who was excommunicated by Rabbi Yehuda comes to the base medrash, Amalahu, and he says to the Rabbanim, Sharoli. Now that Rabbi Yehuda is gone, and he was the one who put me into Cherem, you should be empowered to release the cherem, the nidui. Amalei Rabbana, no. You're missing a principle. This principle that we're about to learn is formulated by the Gemara in Beitza and elsewhere, that Gavra de Chashiv Rabbi Yehuda Leka Hachal B'Litrela. We have a principle that goes that Bezdin Acher, another Bezdin, cannot override the decree of the first Bezdin, Elam Kain Gadol Mimenu B'Chachma B'Minyan. So we don't have a greater Bezdin than Rabbi Yehuda to release the initial enactment of Rabbi Yehuda that placed you in Nidui. However, we could suggest one thing. There's one contemporary of Rabbi Yehuda who's still alive, and he is on a status that he can relieve and he can terminate the Nidui. Who's that? Ozil Gabi Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya. Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya was the grandson of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, and he was a great scholar. Delishrei Loch, he and only he on the globe today can rescind and revoke the Nidui of Rabbi Yehuda because he's on such a level. Ozil Kameh, so the person took their advice and he went to Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya. Amalei, Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya turned to Rabbi Ami, Puk Ayin B'Dinei. Go check this out. Imi boy lemishrele. If the halacha says that we release him of his nidui, then go ahead and do so. And make a public declaration to the effect that we have a leniency here. It's proper to release this person of his nidui. Now, the impression you get from this Gemara is that Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya was pushing, or his agenda was to be lenient and to remove the nidui. Mm-hmm. And indeed, that's what happened. Sharile. I'm sorry. Ayin Rabbi Ami B'Dinei and Savra L'Mishrile. He was about to release and revoke the nidui. But who was alive at that time? Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani. Amar Rabbi Shmuel. Amad Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani al Raglov. Whenever you see that, it means he takes a stand against the majority. He rose up to his feet in the Beis Medrash. The Omer, he declares, Uma shivcha shel Beis Rebbe. Lo nagu chachamim kalos rosh b'niduya shalosh shanim. You know, the shivcha in the house of Beis Rebbe, now we're going back 2 generations earlier to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, she was a very famous woman, very clever, and she put someone into nidui. We'll see in just a minute why she did so, and it has to do with what's called lifnei iver lo sitein michshol. You know, a father is not allowed to hit his son, even to discipline his son, if his son is a gadol. Now, I don't know what the word gadol means. Either it means he's bar mitzvah, or it means he's mature enough such that if you anger him, he will lash back at you. And that's lifnei iver. And that's paskin in Shulchan Aruch and Hilchos Kibbud Av, that a father is not allowed to hit an older son. Now, as a result of the fact that the Shivcha of Rebbe put someone into Cherem because he hit his oldest son, the Cherem lasted for 3 years. And no one had the audacity to release that person from the Cherem. It seems that 3 years is a very significant period of time. And after 3 years, there's a sort of the nidui goes down a little bit. It's lighter, and then we can be matir. We can remove the nidui. Yehuda Chavirein halachas kam v'kama. If our great scholar Rabbi Yehuda put someone into cherem, for sure we're not going to tamper with that cherem. It's not going to be easy to release him. Amar Rabbi Zera, man de kamon. Why did this happen to us? This Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani had not shown up in the Beis Medrash for years. He was a very, very old man. And Punkt, exactly at that moment, when they were about to release this cherem, all of a sudden he shows up with his Kal V'chomer. The also Idnai Sabbath Beis Midrasha, this elder person comes into the Beis Medrash. The Kamak Shani Lo also for years we haven't seen him. Shmamino, this is a sign from heaven. Lo mi boile mishrele. It's not the right thing to do to release this scholar from his band. And lo sharale, because of the statement, the declaration and the dramatic declaration of Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani, they changed their mind and they left the person in need. And now, since all of this story is like Lamala Min HaTeva, the Gemara tells us another part of the story, which is Lamala Min HaTeva. Nafak, when he was rejected, this excommunique, Kikabachi v'Azil, he was crying and walking along. Asa zibura v'tarke a'amose. He was bitten in his privates. This is what we call mida keneged mida, as he couldn't control his taiva. Right. He was not able to do what's called tikkun abris, if you're familiar with that phrase. B'shachiv, and he actually it had an infection and it spread throughout his whole body and he died. Now the question is, did this man do tshuva? Again, he had to be punished for his crime, but can we bury him in a good place? The Chevra Kadisha wanted to bring him to the burial place of the Chasidim. Chasidim here means the tzaddikim. So let's keep in mind, he was a great scholar. He had taught Torah and transmitted the Torah to the entire academy. But lo kiblu, they would not accept him. The fact that he died that kind of a death in Nidui, we're not going to accept him amongst the Hasidim. It's interesting how they had different sections. Right. You know, in the cemeteries around New York, for example, they have what's called Landslagschaft. You know, if you came from the same town back in Lita, that's where they buried you. In the time of the Gemara, and a Chelkas HaChasidim and a Chelkas HaDayonim. Ailulim Ha'asid Dayone, they took him to the cave of the burial place of the Dayanim, the judges, Vikibua, and they accepted him. Apparently, they realized that he did do tshuva. He wasn't a chassid, but he was on a high level, and they put him in there. Now, I just want to add here that this Gemara appears also Bava Kama, and the Gemara Bava Kama adds another element into the picture. This whole story is like above nature. What happened is when they tried to bring him to the cave of the Hasidim, and the Chevra Kadisha wanted to bury him there, a snake appeared at the mouth of the cave and threatened to kill them. So they had no choice but to pack out. I asked my timer, why is it that when they got to the cave of the judges, he was accepted? The Ovid Kirabi Eloi, he did tshuva based on the recommendation of Rav Eloi. And this is a very famous statement of Rav Eloi about how a person should do tshuva. And honestly, I never really understood whether it's A or B. I'll explain as we go along where I'm confused. The Sanya, Rabbi Eloi Omer, and other Yitzhak Gabriel. A person sees that he just can't do it. For some reason, he can't get the energy together to overcome his passion, then at least so instead of doing it and violating the Torah in a way that people will recognize who he is and so forth and so on, there'll be a terrible chil Hashem. Let him go incognito to a place where nobody knows him. He should wear black. So the simple pshat in this Gemara, Yasem Ashalibo Chafetz, is that, in a sense, Rabbi Eloi is saying, look, we have to reconcile with the fact that you can't overcome Yetzer Hara. You're going to do these Averas. Let's do damage control. And instead of doing it in a place where we recognize you, go in a place incognito. People are going to think you're from the scum of the earth. You're the lowest of the low. You're wearing black. You're disheveled. They don't know you when you show up. You're just a lowlife. And therefore, it's not such a chil Hashem as as that of a person with reputation who goes around doing these kinds of things. So this is the way that Rav Eloi prescribed a person who's going to do the Averas, but at least to remove the element of chil Hashem. But I'm confused because there's another interpretation. And that's Rav Haigon. Rav Haigon says that chas v'sholem, we can't say that Rav Eloi was giving us a prescription for sinning, but rather, if you go to a place where it's unknown, nobody knows you, and nobody respects you, and you wear humbling attire, this is going to deflate your ego and your passion, and it's going to prevent you from sin. And if you accept Rashi in the name of Haigon, it could be that the reason why they buried him amongst the judges is because, in fact, he did tshuva. Aziva sachet, he abstained from sin. Now, what was the story of the Shivcha of Beis Rebbe that Reb Shmuel Bar Nachmani mentioned? Maihi, what's the story? The Amsa de Bei Rebbe Chazse Lau Gavra, she saw a person, Dahavi Mochi Libno Katan, he's beating his mature son. There's a footnote here in the art scroll. He says, Gadol means the oldest or an adult, but then he quotes a Ritva who says that we're talking about a mature child who's less than bar mitzvah, but he's mature enough to resist his father's blows by either hitting back or cursing him. Amra, she declared, Leheviyahu Gavra Bishamta, let this person be in a nidui. Which al pidrush means literally it means a stumbling block for the blind, but al pidrush it means don't cause a person and tempt him to sin. And by striking your son who's mature, you are tempting him to lash back, hit you back, chas v'sholem, or curse you, which is a chiv misa. That's a capital crime. Today it's quite common that you could have a son who's twice your size. I have it in my family. One of my grandchildren is gigantic. I mean, we can't believe he's a Burzon. Okay, his mother's quite full. She's from Memphis, Tennessee. But if you would strike him, and again, he's not a Kaisen at all, Baruch Hashem. He's a great basketball player, but okay. So in any event, you don't want to strike a big guy like that, So she put him into Cherem, Tesanya l'fnei evil l'sitei michshol b'makeh b'no gadol hakosim b'dam. And that was the Kavachomra of Shmuel Bar Nachmani, that if the Shivcha of Rebbe put this man into Cherem for 3 years, nobody touched that Cherem, that neither. How much more so if Rav Yehuda, the great Rav Yehuda, put that man into Cherem? Because his reputation was horrible. And we say where there's smoke, there's fire. Unfortunately, we live in a society, and it's probably true even at the time of the Gemara, that the guy is so important. He has such a stature. He's got, he's wearing the badge. I'm the Rosh Hashiva. That nobody wants to mess around with him. Everyone's afraid of him. We're going to have a whole Gemara now about someone who's afraid to put someone else into Chayrim. Reish Lakish, that's not this Gemara, but a little bit later on. Reish Lakish havi minater pardesa. It's interesting how Reish Lakish had a parnasa. He was a guardian over orchards. That's what they paid him for. He was also a strong guy, Reish Lakish. Somebody starts mooching, stealing, thieving the dates on the orchard tree. Ramabei Reish Lakish starts yelling at him. He doesn't pay any attention. He continues to steal the dates. Reish Lakish declared, let this person be in a nidui. Amalei. You see, I want to make one point here. We discussed Ovid Inish Dina L'Nafshe. It's one thing if you want to take the law into your hands, but it's another thing to just whammy a guy with nidui because he's stealing. And I'm not saying stealing is a great thing. It's a pretty bad thing. Naida Shamnu, Bagadnu, and the Gimel is Gazalnu. So it's up there on the top. It's a very severe Avera. But it doesn't necessarily warrant nidui. Nidui is generally speaking designated for someone who insults the Torah itself. You have a monetary claim against someone, he's a thief, take him to Bezdin. Don't put a nidui on him. But Amalei heavy ahu gavram shamta. Amalei, so the thief responds, and he says, Adarab, on the contrary, Levi ahu gavra b'shamta. You should be in shamta. Why? Because imamon nischavti lecha. If by stealing these dates, I'm a thief, then nidui mean is chayvabi? Look, am I chayv in nidui? Did I do anything to you to insult you? Did I undermine your Torah? You have a monetary claim that I'm a thief? Take me to Bezdin. Also, the Midrasha, Reish Lakish was very confused by this whole story because either he successfully put this thief into nidui, or the opposite is true, and the thief put him into nidui. Amulei, the rabbis told him, Shalo nidui shalcha einin. You're in nidui, not him. You were not justified in putting him into nidui. And if you use, or shall we say abuse your authority to put someone into nidui, then you yourself will be placed into nidui. So Reish Lakish asked him, "My takante, how can I get out of this? This is not good. I don't want to be in nidui." Zil legabe delishelach. Go ask mechila from the person. Imagine Reish Lakish has to beg on all fours from the thief to relieve him of nidui. So Reish Lakish says, "Lo yadanale." I wouldn't even recognize him if he show me a mugshot, of all the people that are wanted, dead or alive. I wouldn't recognize him. The only last leaf that has to be turned is you go to the Nesiya. The Sanyos we learned in the Brisa, Nido, Vieni Adem Michanido, Elechetzel Nasi Viatulo Nido. It seems like the Nasi has some very, very powerful authority. Omar Rav Huna. Now, after the Sanhedrin left Yavne, Gemara tells us in Cheskes Sabatim, they were exiled to a place called Usha. And they made a takana. There were many takanas in Usha, one of which was Av Bezdin Shesarach Ein Menadenos. Again, it shocks me that the Gemara, unabashedly, without embarrassment, tells you about all these great scholars that were guilty of who knows what, that the reputation was awful. And according to the Takana in Ucha, we will not put this person into Nidui because that would involve a tremendous Chil Hashem, but rather we sort of imply to him that he should stay home, be quarantined, like I was for the last week. Hela Omerlo, he covered v'shev v'secha pasuk in Malachim Perik, in Malachim Beis Perik Yudalad. This is a reply to Amatzia, who was Melech Yehuda, and it was sent to Yoyash, Melech B'Yisrael. There was about to be a civil war. Now, what did Chazal gain by quoting this pasuk? Maintain your honor and stay at home. Meaning, we're not going to put you into nidui, but tudmir toiva, as we say, do yourself a favor and just stay close to home. But chazar v'sara. Unfortunately, as great of a person that he was the Av Bezdin, he could not control his passion, and a second time, he was guilty of that same crime. Is then menadan oso mipnei chil Hashem. At this point already, we have to go public here. We can't just tell him, I think you should stay home. Let's not see the white of your eyes. At this point, we have to put him into need. Upliga de Reish Lakish. And Reish Lakish would oppose what Rav Huna said in the name of Chachmei Usha. The Yomar Reish Lakish, Talmud Chacham Chesarach, Ein Menaden Oso Befarhes. We don't publicly put him into Nidui. Again, Reish Lakish wanted to put a thief into Nidui, but not a Talmud Chacham. Why? Because of Chil Hashem. And here he quotes a pasuk in Hosea, Shenemar v'kashalta hayom v'kashal gam nevi imcha v'layl, imcha layl. Navi imcha layl. You will stumble by day, and the false prophet who is with you will also stumble as if by night. Kiso b'layl. We must conceal this leader who is sinful. And just like night brings darkness, we have to conceal everything from view. And once again, I have to tell you that this is not a great policy. And that's what happened just recently. Everything was shoved under the rug. What?
Yeah, no, I know. Very bad.
I don't know if you read, Rabbi Lopyansky had a very good article in the
I read it.
Mishpacha, and before that, Rav Y.Y. Jacobson also struck. Somebody told me that Rav Meisman spoke out. I don't know. I didn't get a chance to find out. Now, if you want to put someone into nidui, you feel very badly about it, especially if it's a tzur mi'merabbanan that you're putting into nidui. So, as an exercise in humility, Mar Zutra bereisha mishamte nafshe. And we're going to soon prove from a statement of Rav that a person could put himself into nidui. And that's exactly what Mar Zutra did. It wasn't a long-term nidui, but v'hada mishamte l'didei, and then he put this Talmud Chacham, this tzur mi'merabbanan to nidui. Yavi Ayl Buch Pisa, when he went to sleep at night, Sharilei Lenafshe, he released himself from the self-imposed nidui, for Hadar Sharilei Ledidei, and then he would release the student. Meaning that he felt even a one-day nidui was enough so that the student would get the message and shape up. Amarav Gido Amarav, Talmud Chacham Menadol Liatzmo, Umefer Liatzmo. A Talmud Chacham can put himself into nidui and then revoke the nidui. And that's exactly what Mar Zutra was doing. Amarav Papa, Tasili. Tasili is a phrase that means I should be rewarded. He was finding in himself a nekuda tova, a good point. But I never put a Talmud Chacham into nidui. In other words, I avoided that chil Hashem of putting a Talmud Chacham into nidui. So wait a minute. What is Rav Papa saying? Are we going to leave these criminals who are public leaders without any sort of punishment? What do I do, says Rav Papa, if he deserves to be put into Shamta? And he answers, Ki had b'marava mimnu angedei d'tzumir rabbanim. In Eretz Yisrael, they took a vote on the following issue that came up in the Beis Medrash. What's worse or what's better? Which is the lesser of two evils? Right. To zap a Talmud Chacham with nidui, or to give him 39 lashes? And they decided angedei. Angedei means to give him lashes would be better than putting him into Shamta. Apparently, Shamta is very public because no one's allowed to come close to him. But lashes, it could be some people know about it, some people don't know anything about it. It's less of a chil Hashem. And this is Sugim Psachim on Daf Nun Beis. My Shamta, what is the meaning of the word Shamta? Omar Rav, Shem Misa. When you put a person into Nidui, it's like he's dead. He's totally excluded from the world. He's not part of the social community. And therefore, it's like he's dead. Shmuel Amar, what's the meaning of the word Shamta? Shmama Yeh. Oh, this is really heavy. He'll be completely destroyed. Total destruction and desolation. However, Umahanya be tichya betanura. No, we're not up to the however. However, is later on. And it's like fat in an oven. You smear an oven with fat. As soon as you turn on the fire of the oven, the fat goes up in smoke. Total destruction. Upliga the Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish is of the opinion that no, there's no total destruction. You put a person into nidui, and eventually he's released from his nidui, unscathed. When we excommunicate him, it has an impact on his 248 limbs. Kach shiyotza, when he goes out of nidui and re-enters into society, is he's given back his 248 limbs. And Reish Lakish supports it in the following. If you take a look at the gematria of Cherem, it says, V'hoisa ha'ir Cherem. Look at the word Cherem. Cherem has a resh in it, which is 200. And Ches and Mem is 48, 248. So Cherem means when we have an impact on 248, all of his organs. Cherem gematria masayim ve'arba'im shmonim. Kshiyotza, when the nidui comes to an end, then it's removed from the 248 limbs, the chsiv, as the pasuk says. I didn't realize this was a pasuk. We say it in davening. The roges rachem tizka. Look at the word rachem. Rachem is exactly the same three letters as cherem, just in a different sequence. Right. And rachem b'gamashi afiyav, it's also 248. So the rachamim of Hashem will cleanse his 248 Eivarim. Rav Yosef, Shtei Shamta Agnuvasa de Kalba. We're talking about the tail of a dog, which is not a critical organ. A dog could live without its tail. And if you put a person in Shamta, and you don't know who that person is, there's someone anonymous who's guilty of a crime, and you say, whoever he is, he should be in Shamta. It turned out that the crime in this particular scenario was committed not by a human being, but by a dog. It will accomplish its goal. This dog was a shoe freak. It was a leather freak. He loved to chew up the leather, but after the leather shoes of the Chachamim. They had no clue who was the one who was messing up their shoes. They probably thought it was a human being. Unbeknown to them, it was a dog. And they put this anonymous violator, we faceless, we don't know who he is, and they put him into Shamta. And who was this violator who was eating up their shoes? It was none other than the dog. Is itle beinura bignuvase viachlas. The tail of the dog was burnt. And again, that's not one of the essential limbs of a dog, but nevertheless, nidui will destroy any limb of 248. Hahu alma, right? An alma is a gavra limta. Gavra limta throughout the Gemara is someone who he's a mafioso. You don't want to start up with him. He's very powerful. Davi komitzayir leila hura tzurver abanon, and he was chattering with a young scholar, tormenting him. Also, Lakami to Rav Yosef, this young scholar came in front of Rav Yosef. Amalei, Rav Yosef told him, Zil, go ahead and shamte, excommunicate this big bully. Amalei, Rav Yosef Mr. Finamine, I'm afraid of him. This is where the justice system breaks down, when we're afraid to, but we saw before that Rav Yehuda was very proud of himself. I'm going with a smile to the next world because I know I didn't kowtow in front of this great, the head of the yeshiva, the head of the academy. Amalei Mr. Finamine, I'm afraid of him. Amalei, Rav Yosef says to him, Chile psicha ale. Now, what's a psicha? A psicha is a document that is written up by a court if the nitba, the defendant, doesn't show up in Bezdin. So they send him a psicha. Shkile pischa ale. Take out a pischa on him. Is kolshkein de Mr. Finale, meaning says, how much more so am I afraid of him? Because you're asking me to write what we call a pachkavilla, some sort of a excommunication text, letter, going to encourage his anger. I'm afraid of him. Amalei. You know what? I know what you could do to this guy. Have him knocked off.
Okay.
Not that you should kill him. Don't go near him with a gun. He'll rip you to shreds. And here we get one of those Gemaras, with schoolers, Achte bekada, take this ksav, this pischa, and put it into a jar. This is what's called a kli cheres. And throughout Shas, the kli cheres represents a human being. Because a kli cheres, the Torah says, yishaveh. When you break apart a piece of pottery, it's gone forever. And man in this state is gone with death. So the jar that's made of cheres is symbolically representative of a human being and his death. And here we turn to Daf Yud Zayin Amud Beis. The achte be kivrei, take this kli cheres and put it into a beis hakvaros, which is also going to bring him down. It's all symbolic of death. Ukribe, and blow alpha shipure shofros, the arboim yomin. 40 days, on each day 1,000 shofar blasts. I don't know exactly how you'll fit this all into one day. I don't know. But Azil Avid Hachi, he took Rav Yosef's advice and he implemented this to the T. And Paka Kada Umeis Alm. The jar burst, broke into little pieces, which is symbolic of the human being, here in this case, the person who was meant to be a nidui because he tormented the young scholar, who mace, and he died. Maishi Pure, why blast the shofar? Shenifroi mimen. By putting a person into nidui, we exact retribution against it. And the word shofar comes from the word retribution, pra'ah. My tavra. And what does it mean that we blow? Tavra means broken, like a trua, as opposed to a tekiah or shvarim. Amar Rav Yitzchak, Bereder Rav Yehuda, Tavre Bate Ramen. This is a metaphor for breaking down tall buildings, like, for example, at the time of Yericho. The Sanya, Amar Rav Shimon Gamliel, Kol Makom Shenasnu Chachamei Nehem, O Misa O Eni, O Oni. The Rabbanan have this ability through their eyes to put a whammy on someone. And the broken blasts of the shofar shattered tall buildings, like as we said at the time of Yoshua. And kol makom shenastu chachamei nehem, o misa o oni, either death or poverty. This is probably based on the Gemara in Nedarim that arba chashuvim kemesa. One of them is a poor person. Yeah, he quotes the Gemara. Look at that. Poverty is equivalent to death, as stated in Nedarim. The sages are exceptionally sharp and precise, for they perceive far more than ordinary people. Hence, their eyes are tough. And when their eyes are set on the Rishayim, for purpose of exacting punishment, the effect is devastating, either death or poverty. So that's called setting their eyes.